And Audacity in 3, 2, 1. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast, episode 82 today. And today we're going to be talking about a very special topic that I think it won't speak to everybody, but it's going to speak to people who really, really need to hear this stuff. And that's going to be about perimenopause and women in their menopausal age range and what that means for your results when it comes to fat loss, when it comes to strength gain, when it comes to your body changing. And today we're bringing in an expert to talk about that, Amanda Thebe. Am I saying that right?
Correct.
Awesome. So she is Canada's first menopause coach, and she's a guest on a lot of podcasts and shows. So maybe you've heard of her before if you've Google searched stuff about menopause, but she basically helps companies to normalize the conversation around menopause, provide support around the topic. And she's also the author of the book Menopocalypse: How I Learned to Thrive During Menopause and How You Can Too. So we're really excited to learn a lot from you today because Christina and I, neither of us are really experts on this topic. So yeah, if you want to maybe introduce yourself a little bit further, if it's warranted, and just kind of intro us into you and how you got into all this.
Yeah, so I have a very similar background to you both because we just spoke before this. So I think I did my personal training back in the UK with Loughborough University back when I was 21, and I'm 51 now, so 30 years ago. And you know what we learn in those educational courses. We learn all about strength training and progressive overload and smart training goals, etc., etc. And then I did subspecialties, which lots of trainers do, things to do with pre-post pregnancy. I also did rehabilitation. I did some stuff working with pro athletes. I've worked with the NBA a little bit as well. I've had a very varied career, but all within the health and fitness world. Some nutrition training too. So that was sort of like my my background, my career. And it's really interesting because when I was 40, I sort of felt actually the best I'd ever felt. Like even from my 20s and 30s, I went into my 40s and I thought to myself, I've got this. I feel like I'm a really good role model for women. And I don't mean that in a smug way, like look at me, but in a way that says, we're not all dead and done for by the time we're 40, because there's this pervasive narrative out there. And so that when I started doing my social media, I just wanted to put the message out there that we can and we should sort of take care of our health, and especially into our 40s and 50s. And so all of that was going well. I had an in-person business in Toronto. Many women came. There was a few guys as well. And the age range between 30 and 60. It was a very varied gamut. And women would mention menopause in passing. They'd say, oh yeah, menopause is kicking my ass today. Or, I think I'm going to pee my pants. It was a very open class, or along the lines of my joints are aching. I'm so tired. And while I didn't completely understand, I tried to be empathetic. And I think usually coaches are quite empathetic. And so I would give them adaptations they could do to their training program that day and really try and work with where they were at. But part of me was like, I have no idea what they're talking about. I mean, what do they mean that joints are aching because of menopause? And so I was fairly ignorant myself when I was 40. And it's really interesting because you both told me you're in your late 20s, early 30s. So menopause isn't even in your periphery, never mind in your frontline vision. When I was 40, menopause wasn't even in my periphery because I just was thinking, well, this is an old person thing. This is something that your granny gets, or you've got gray hair, or it's just not for people who look like me. I mean, and I know that's a really ignorant viewpoint, but I didn't look at myself and think that I could be a menopausal woman. And so it was never something I really understood about. And then when I was 42, my business is going well. I'd started to get a bit of a social media following without too much effort. I think they saw me as somebody who was probably very authentic and real and liked that. I wasn't pretending to be something I wasn't. But I got very unwell and I started feeling different, but I couldn't work out what was going on properly. And I think it was more that first, I think my personality changed. Like I started getting depression, but I didn't know it was depression. I'd never had that my whole life, despite actually really shitty things happening in my life. I sort of had never been depressed. But anyway, I didn't recognize myself. I felt a little bit odd. I wasn't connected with my family and my husband and friends as much. And then I started having like physical symptoms, like losing feeling in the whole side of my face and down one side of my body, like not being able to walk, terrible vertigo, nausea that would last for days and days and days, and then it would clear up and then it would come back again. Terrible incontinence. And I'd had two kids like with 5 years before, never had incontinence, and I couldn't even go for a little walk without pissing myself. And it was just like the whole thing was very devastating. And then I literally spent 2 years in the medical system. I was in Canada. I had very good healthcare, but not one single healthcare practitioner who I saw, and I saw many specialists, could identify what was going on. They were like, yeah, we can see you're not well, but we don't know what's wrong with you. Like nothing's clear to us. And then I went for an annual checkup. You know, we have to go for our pap tests and stuff, ladies. And so I went for that. My gynecologist just happened to say, and how are you? And I started crying. I said, I don't think I'm very well. And he just said, okay, I've got a few minutes, tell me about it. And so I simply described what I'd been feeling, and what I'd been feeling changed from day to day. So it was very hard to be tangible about it. It was I felt like I was being vague, and I didn't expect him to ask me. And so I rambled on for a little bit, and he just said, yeah, I see this all the time. This is perimenopause. You know, I can help you. This is valid. You're not going crazy. And have you had any hot flashes? And I was like, what? Shut the door. I literally couldn't have the conversation. And I think I was a little bit rude with him. I was like, I'm 42. Why are we having this conversation? Anyway, that's the start of it for me. I fell down the perimenopausal rabbit hole because I just was pissed. I just was like, so this is something that happens to every single woman, if she's lucky enough, right? Because the alternative is for them not to survive, right? So every female will go through menopause, and yet we don't know about it. We think it's an old lady thing, and you stop getting your periods and you have hot flashes, and it's so much more than that. I felt really let down by the fitness and health industry, that nobody was speaking about it, and that and I felt like I was a very educated person going into this. And I just was mad with the medical community. I was embarrassed because I felt like I'd failed. Oh my God, there was so many emotions. And so I just started talking about it. And so now that's like 7-8 years ago. I feel like I talk about it all the time, of course, now, but the kids are like, yeah, it's probably menopause, mom. But like, I just feel as though what's happened since that time, thank goodness, we're having conversations. Look, you two are having a conversation about perimenopause. That wouldn't have happened 7 years ago. And so we're in a better place as far as knowledge is concerned. And to me, that should underpin everything. Women can make better informed choices when they know, rather than when they don't know. It's that simple to me.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we've kind of seen this trend with a lot of things. Like, for example, pre and postnatal is somehow a niche, even though like 85% of women have kids. Like pelvic floor health is somehow this like taboo topic that no one knew about. And like, that's something that every single person on the planet who's a human being has a pelvic floor. So yeah, I think we're starting to really like unravel a lot of these more taboo things that no one wants to talk about. So I'm really happy that we have you.
The pelvic floor thing is like, I think about the women and my friends post pregnancy, postpartum, you would say, that had pelvic floor issues and put up with it because they assumed that that was expected and it was normal, and it's not. It's common but not normal. And the minute that we, like, the first time I said menopause out loud and the first time I said vagina out loud, I was like, okay, I've opened that door now. I could just go there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So I actually just came back from pelvic floor PT this morning, but it's something that I would have no idea to even consider if I hadn't been on social media, because nothing teaches you about it. Like Marissa and I had this conversation. We were going through our pre and postnatal certification about everything about the pelvic floor. We had no idea. You don't learn about in your certifications for becoming a PT. So I think it's great that we are having these conversations and really educating everyone, no matter what your age is or what stage you're at, because kind of like you were saying, like you're gonna go through this.
And the pelvic floor, like, is it's such a great conversation. It's very valid for our conversation today. And you know, we go into perimenopause, and estrogen receptors are all over the body, and it's something. I mean, I can explain what the whole system is, but we know that estrogen receptors are all over the body, and including the pelvic region. And so there is actually a condition known as the genitourinary symptoms of menopause. It was used to be called vaginal atrophy, but it really encompasses way more than just the vagina. Like, you know, the whole integrity of the pelvic floor, the vagina, the vulva, everything is impacted when estrogen starts to decline. And if a woman knows that, along with some treatment options, that there is pelvic floor help that they can get too, like, it's a literal game changer. And when it comes to things like painful sex and urinary issues, I mean, I think that every woman should just be given a pelvic health physio, but they're not. In France, you know, when you've had a baby, you get one. It's part of the healthcare afterwards. It's just amazing. They're so forward thinking. So
Wow. No,
anyway,
great.
I digress. I'm a bit of a Tommy tangent. Sorry.
Yeah, no, actually, that's perfect. Like a perfect segue, because the first question that we were going to ask you was, let's talk about menopause from kind of start to finish here. Like, let's define it, because I think that there's just such a lack of awareness. And if I even tried to describe it, I wouldn't get farther than, I mean, what we've said so far. So tell us, what is menopause physiologically? Like, what are these changes that a woman is going through? And then what effects does it have?
Yeah, and so it can be broken down into 3 stages. So you have perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause. So the perimenopause is sometimes called menopause transition. So they're interchangeable words. And postmenopause is sometimes just referred to as being menopausal. That's sort of interchangeable as well. So it's a spectrum. It's a journey which diminishes what happens a little bit, but it's like a spectrum of things that happen. So if we start with perimenopause, from our late 30s, so actually it's not too far away. I had my last kid at 38, and I think I started having symptoms quite soon after that. Actually, think about the year after that. So from our late 30s anywhere to our 50s, we can experience perimenopausal symptoms. What happens is our fertility hormones that are produced in our ovary, the progesterone and the estrogen, start to decline. And they do this in 2 different ways. The progesterone, if you think about, I use the hands all the time, and I don't know if there's any visuals in this one, but think about a slide. Estrogen goes down in a very linear way, whereas estrogen fluctuates like a roller coaster. So you've got estrogen roller coastering and progesterone sliding down. So these happen over a period of 8 to 10 years on average, which is why perimenopause, or the menopause transition, is really problematic for a lot of women, because the changes in their hormones are impacted over a long period of time. So this current statistics state that 75% of women will struggle with menopausal symptoms. And really, they're talking about perimenopausal symptoms. 1 in 4 women will have severe enough symptoms that it will impact their quality of life. And so that was me, for sure, right? I really lost a couple of years, and so that's why I became quite vocal. So and by 2025, we'll have 1 billion women in menopause. So it impacts a lot of us, right? So it's not a small number. 51% of the population are women, and we're all going to go through this, right? So there's varying degrees. One woman's menopausal journey will be nothing like somebody else's, similar to pregnancy. We can't compare pregnancies because we all experience it differently, right? And so estrogen is produced in the ovaries, but the receptors impact almost every single system in our body, which is something I learned I didn't realize. So it crosses the blood-brain barrier. It goes to our joints in our GI tract. It protects our heart. It protects our bones. It's a very important hormone. It's an anabolic hormone, so it sort of is a building block type hormone. And so when we start to lose that, the impact can feel quite intense. And then we also know that in perimenopause, similar to pregnancy, Dr. Lisa Mosconi is at the forefront of this. She's a neuroscientist, has got scans of the brain shrinking. It shrinks because it sort of doesn't need all of the receptors for its fertility that it needed in pregnancy. So the brain goes through a remodel. So it shrinks. And a lot of women struggle with neurological symptoms that don't present as being hormonal. And that's what I had. And that's what a lot of, so depression, anxiety, cognitive issues, literally forgetting words, forgetting people's names, like short-term issues, and then brain fog and insomnia. These are all like things that are life-changing, but they don't feel hormonal, right? If you presented to your doctor with those, he'd probably give you sleeping tablets, antidepressants, anti-anxiety. He wouldn't automatically think that these were menopausal symptoms. And then there's other things like joint pain, hot flashes, and even the hot flashes that people get can be night sweats and cold sweats, are all in the hypothalamus in the brain. They're actually a brain triggered perceived temperature change. So like there's a lot happens in the body that is bigger than just hot flashes. And one of the unfortunate things is that in medical school, GPs do not get training in menopause management. And it's because it's not a disease or a deficiency, it's a life phase, right? But it doesn't mean that it isn't really impactful and women don't struggle. And I have a community of like 60, 70,000 women, and I hear dreadful stories almost at suicidal point. Like it can be horrible for a lot of women. And so if they go to their GP and are told to just get on with it, that's super frustrating. And even going to a gynecologist who you would think would be the specialist, only 10% of gynecologists get menopause management training in medical school. So there's a massive disservice happening in the menopause industry. Well, industry, it is an industry now actually, but in the menopause and medical world. Okay, so you're in the 8 to 10 years of perimenopause, and then as a retrospective, when you get to 12 months without your period, so you have to look back, you can't look forward at that. Retrospectively, if you haven't had a period for 12 months, you're considered in menopause. So it's a pinpoint, it's a line in the sand, it's just nothing happens. There's no marching band or fanfare, like that's it. And then anything past that period, moving forward, you're considered to be postmenopausal or menopausal. And actually that's where I am. I went through menopause at the age of 48, 51 now. And then what typically happens is most women find that those crazy symptoms of perimenopause die down somewhat because the estrogen and progesterone are at their lowest level. That's when we enter the next 30, 40 years and we've got this baseline estrogen and progesterone level, and actually testosterone too, but that declines with age, not with menopause. So that runs alongside. So we've got these low level of hormones. And so then we're in like this new world. And so I do like to sort of like preface that by saying that the majority of women do feel better postmenopausal after a 3 to 5 year period, right? So those that have really struggled, eventually it does calm down, but there's always going to be some women that are the exception to the rule and continue to have issues. And one of the main issues that almost every woman continues to have is the GSM symptoms, the genitourinary symptoms, because when you don't have the estrogen in the vaginal region, nothing can replace it. There is no like adjustment that happens. And so there's localized estrogen cream that women can take that doesn't get into the system. It just stays in that area, that can be super helpful. And what also happens is the brain, we know now within that 3 to 5 year window, regrows, it rebounds. It's like this, the most amazing thing. There's MRI scans have shown the smaller brain and the fat brain at the end. And I'll finish off by saying, like, interestingly enough, I'm in Dr. Lisa Mosconi's research study. I wanted to do it. I was like super excited. And I'm like so nerdy, and I wanted to have the MRIs, and I'm postmenopausal, so I never saw my brain in perimenopause. I wish I had. But she was like saying at the scan, your brain's like big and fat and juicy, and the hypothalamus and your amygdala and all of these are working well. And you're proof that, you know, it does reset, it does come back for the majority of women. And so we've got this worry about diseases in postmenopause, like Alzheimer's, dementia, cardiovascular disease, you know, being insulin resistant, having diabetes, and all of these diseases that women are getting thrown at them, saying you're going to be high risk at these. And I want to be the voice of reason that says, yeah, for sure, but there's so much you can do to offset that. There's so much you can do to reduce the risk of that. That's sort of my message along here. So perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause are part of the whole conversation.
Yeah, that's the whole message that we like to relay with a lot of things, with whether it's aging or, you know, whatever, you know, I guess dysfunction or defect you might have that makes you feel like you can't achieve anything in your fitness journey. You know, there's so much we can control. There's so much we can do. I had so many light bulbs go off in literally everything you just said. So a little bit about my background. My undergraduate degree was in neuroscience. For many people in my degree program, they were on the pre-med track. I was not. I chose not to be. It's not something I wanted to do. But yeah, no one talked about this. This was not a part of the conversation in any of my classes and any curriculum ever. Like, not a single thing rang a bell of like, oh yeah, I learned about that. So that's concerning.
So Dr. Lisa Mosconi is somebody who's working, she has a book called The XX Brain, but her study is groundbreaking. She's had to fight for years to get funding, but all of a sudden she's getting the funding. And she desperately needs people. So if there's any women listening to this who can get to New York and they're perimenopausal or postmenopausal or even not, they want people outside of that because they want full spectrum, like they probably would use like you ladies too.
Yeah.
It's so important because it's helping women's health in an amazing way. But yeah, she's breaking new ground with that for sure.
So that's really, really cool stuff. And also, like, I started a master's program and I took a little break from it, a little hiatus, but my research in that was about hormonal birth control. And in all the studies that I would read, it was like, oh, for the control group, we're going to use postmenopausal women. And I was like, never knew why that was. Now I do. So just some like cool like connects that kind of came from that, and just learning
they've got no estrogen and progesterone. Let's give them a bit and see what happens.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, we can talk about treatment options if necessary, but women who are in early menopause, because menopause can happen in a different way. So for the majority of women, it's an evolution of our life stages, almost like a reverse puberty. But for some women, it can be a little bit different. So you've got women that go into early menopause under the age of 40. And that's concerning, because if a woman starts to act like, if you're in menopause under the age of 40, you've got no sex hormones. Your body actually needs that, and you then do become at higher risk for things like osteoporosis and cardiovascular issues. So birth control pill is actually, a low dose is one of the treatment options for that, because they actually typically need their hormones replacing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Other women go into menopause with surgical or through, like if they have their ovaries removed or if they have cancer treatments. And if they have cancer treatments and have estrogen blocking drugs like tamoxifen, then they're going to go into a forced menopause. And so these women don't have, I had 8 to 10 years of hell, but it's better than just waking up one day and being in menopause and having all the symptoms all at once. And so, yeah, they often get a little bit forgotten, unfortunately, but you know, it happens to those women, and they really need to be like heard and helped. And a woman who has a hysterectomy should be offered hormone therapy afterwards, just to ease her through that, you know, trauma, essentially.
Well, we always talk about with our clients, you know, because we want to know about their cycle and symptoms that they're having, things like that. And it's like, gosh, you have like pre-cycle, you have your cycle, and then you have post-cycle. So you have just like one normal week a month, and then we have pre-menopause, and then you have menopause, and you have post-menopause. It's like, oh my gosh, we cannot catch a break.
Nope.
But you know, when you're talking about your cycle, I mean, I never was that person that had a change in their cycle at all before I had my last kid. So I could train the same. It didn't matter when. So when Dr. Stacey Sims and people like that talk about the female physiology and to do with their cycles, I'm like, I didn't get that, because like I could do it. Yeah. And then it was really interesting. After I had my last child at 38, I did notice that the week before the luteal phase, before I had my period, I was just knackered. I used to go to the gym and I always had a cold the week before my period, and just was super fatigued and just was weak, and I couldn't lift. And it was really interesting, but my cycle was still very regular. And I might add that in perimenopause, changes of your hormonal cycle may not happen. Some women don't get a change in their cycle, but they get symptoms. It's not always the first sign. Some women, their cycle changes straight away. So I had like these, like the symptoms that I hear women saying, I was super fatigued in the luteal phase, etc. But in perimenopause, it sort of changes a little bit more, because your symptoms don't make any sense. And so one day you'll wake up feeling like you could rock the world, and then the next day you're just like, if you can get off the sofa, then that's a win, you know. And so women go through these energy slumps and joint pain and other symptoms. Like when you've got depression, it's really hard to do anything to motivate yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And so all of that stuff went out the window for me in perimenopause, and for many women, it's almost like you need an underlying fitness there. You cannot let that go. You need to, even if it's getting outside in nature, we know what it does to our endorphins. Like, please go outside at least once a day. But give yourself some grace when it comes to your training. If you literally have planned to do like a workout session that's going to take 45 minutes, and you wake up and you're like, I don't think I can, that's okay. And I think we need to change the conversation around what workouts look like in perimenopause, so that women don't feel desperately guilty.
I think that Marissa and our coaching styles have matured over the years. And like you were mentioning before, like we are fitness coaches, right? And that's generally what we're there to help our clients with. But I find ourselves more often than not telling our clients like, hey, let's reframe. Like, let's, instead of going to the gym like 5, 6, 7 days, like let's scale back if that's what your schedule can allow, or that's how you're feeling. And so kind of like you were saying, like, you know, they feel like a failure only going to the gym 3 days out of 6, if that's what their scheduled workout or lift is like. So it's like, hey, let's just do 2 or 3 a week. And if they're able to hit that, it's like, yes, that's a win. So kind of reframing. And I think it's interesting, again, like we've shifted, and it's like, we actually encourage our clients to rest and recover more than like push through and like, you know, you have to be dedicated. So I think that that's a really great thing to shed light and to like really educate people on.
And I think that, you know, we've so evolved in the fitness community away from like, you don't need to be sore to have had a good workout, and, you know, all of those things, thank goodness. And I know it was a really hard mind shift for me personally to go from someone who was really invested in, you know, in workouts and scheduling and all of those things to be more flexible when I'm not a flexible person. I really love structure. I just think it works for me, but I couldn't. And so I sort of like came up with like a little bit of a philosophy that's very similar to what you just said, Christina. And I would sort of say on a scale of 1 to 10, how do I feel today? And so that was what I would do. And if it was in the 1 to 3 range, which actually happened quite a lot, then I would be like, okay, so there's no workout today, that's fine, but you're committing to going outside. And I actually had to do that because I got to the point where I was so depressed that I became isolated, and that happens a lot with depression, right? So I would get outside and I even didn't want to go, but I always felt better afterwards. So that's always the goal, isn't it? You want to feel better afterwards and not worse. And then if I was in like that 4 to 6 range, then I would be like, okay, so I can't do my workout. I don't feel like it, but I might just do like a mobility session, or I might just foam roll for a little bit. I'll just do something that makes me feel like I've done something physical, but it wasn't going to be a workout, you know. And then moving along the scale, maybe if I say 6 to 8, then I would be like, okay, I'm going to go and do a workout. My energy level's not completely there, but I can do something. And so I sort of did a bit of fitness snacking, and it was like, I'm going to go in thinking, you know, I know we typically program with like supersets or split body parts or whatever it is we do. I sort of came up with, well, if these are the 5 exercises in my workout, I'm going to sort of do them in a circuit-based fashion. Even though it wasn't circuit training, it was rep based and, you know, with specific rest and everything. And I'll go in and do 1 round of that. So then at least I'm hitting all of the things I want to hit. Because typically when I did 1 round, I felt a bit better when I got into it. So I'd maybe do 2. Yeah. So I would do like a partial workout and it felt good. And then I'd, you know, do some stretching at the end. And I just feel like I got myself that win that was like instead of all or nothing, all or something. Yeah. And then finally, if I woke up feeling amazing, it'd be like, carpe fucking diem. I'm going to just like, I'm going to take, you know, seize the day. And I sort of feel like giving a woman that permission to like say to yourself, you're actually in charge, you know, nobody else. Like, you know, you haven't burnt down an orphanage just because you didn't do a workout. Like, it's fine. It's fine, right?
I love your analogies.
I don't think they're all like proper, but whatever. It's sort of like it's all,
yeah, maybe not PC, but they're funny. I like them. You know, I'm grinning so much because you literally just described like we have different names for the systems that we use with our clients, but the exact same thing. So what we do is we call it our red, yellow, green days. So like think of a stoplight. Red day is exactly what you talked about, 0 to 3 on the scale, right? Yellow's in the middle, green is carpe fucking diem, right? And then like,
and I've heard that before, and I love that system. It's just so practical because it then just gives you a sort of structure, but it also allows you to make a choice. On the other side of things, we also know that women are known, like statistically in the gym. I follow Bill Campbell. I don't know if you follow him. He's so great. One of the studies he did showed that women will always go for the lighter weight, will always like under work out if left to their own devices. So we do have to find the balance. Because I don't want to underplay the fact that women are very, very capable. When I see them walking out of Walmart with their 20 bags of shopping, I know they can carry more than 3 pounds in their hands, right? So it's also that like empowerment without having too much of the toxic positivity, but also acknowledging them that not every day is going to be like that, right?
Yeah. And then especially when we get into that conversation about menopause, it's like your body's going through all these changes, you're having all these symptoms, and maybe you have been able to crush it every single day for the, you know, first 45 years of your life or however long. But when you start getting into these phases, you know, how do we normalize the fact that like maybe you're not going to feel on top of the world every single day? And how do we contingency plan for that? That's what I like to call the like red, yellow, green. It's kind of like a contingency plan for like, if not A, then B, if not B, then C, so that we have a plan to then feel successful and perpetuate momentum so that the person can continue moving forward towards their goals, regardless of, to what capacity each day. So I think
Perfect.
especially in this conversation, this is extremely applicable to maybe people that I'm thinking of one client in particular who like has been asking for this episode, and she's very go, and she's in this age range now, and it's probably hitting her and making her feel all types of ways about herself, because she's a very capable, strong woman. So to have something hit you in the face like this and have you doubt yourself is probably so demoralizing for so many women.
Yes, well said. And I think another thing as well is just that, like, you said at the beginning of the podcast how you've changed your coaching style, or matured your coaching to be really more focused on rest and recovery. It doesn't become more important than in perimenopause, because estrogen impacts our energy system. It's completely impacted by it, the energy system in our brain. And so with that, fatigue is one of the worst symptoms. It's that bone deep fatigue that sometimes you might get just before your period, but it's there and it doesn't lift, and it's just so draining, and sleep doesn't make it better, napping doesn't make it better. And so when women have that like bone crushing fatigue, it's really hard to sort of like feel like it's ever going to get any better. And often the way we train matters around that. So like doing like a strength workout is typically much easier for a woman to recover from than doing like a hard cardio session, which is a bit more catabolic in nature. Like it's just so I know, like for an example for that, for people listening, is like I am a runner, but it was always like I just need to get away from the kids, like that. I was the like the 5K, love my 5Ks. I just go a couple of times a week along the river just so I could be in my own head, right? And I stopped being able to do that. I found that when I was doing that, the next day was written off. I couldn't stop feeling tired after the 5K runs, and sort of dug a bit deeper and realized that like it just was taking longer to recover from that. So I sort of changed my strategy and started doing more sprints, more fartlek, more interval training, things that worked more in an anaerobic threshold that sort of isn't as catabolic, more anabolic in nature and in recovery. And I could do like that for 15, 20 minutes and have all the benefits of a 5K run, but recover a lot better. Recovery from strength training was way easier. I could sort of do them a couple of days in a row. If my symptoms weren't there and I was feeling good, I could maybe do 3 or 4 workouts in a row, and the recovery was sort of fine. And so I think that I advise women to sort of play around and just see what works for them, because if you're constantly like going to your classes and doing these stupid bloody 45-minute Tabata classes and HIIT classes, you're probably not going to feel great after them. And I say they're stupid because they're not HIIT classes and they're not Tabata. Like, we've studied exercise science, and those are supposed to be very short, 4 or 5 minute sessions, not 45. And so just like that, those exhausting type of things that give women a high in the moment, in those classes are the ones that actually the most problematic to recover from. So find a way to make those work, but don't worry if you're taking a while to recover. And then if you do need to recover, sort of respect that your body's smarter than you, and it's sort of signaling to you that you've maybe overdone it and you need to pull back a bit, right?
Yeah. And you mentioned that one of the symptoms that you can experience is osteoporosis. So not only is it good from a recovery standpoint, but also just helping with bone density to do strength training. And I mean, we talk about that for women. I mean, I think that there's the misconception sometimes that you're going to become this like She-Hulk and you're going to just grow all this muscle, and how hard it actually is to do that. But just the health benefits from resistance training is just incredible.
I'm laughing because like for us three, well, like I wish, like literally
I wish I was jacked.
Doing this 30 years, it's so hard to build muscle. So actually I wrote a post about this the other day, because there's a misconception that we cannot build muscle when we're in menopause, right? So yeah, we know sarcopenia is an issue from aging and from being sedentary. That's not particularly a menopausal thing. That's something in our 30s onward. But through perimenopause, estrogen plays a huge role in muscle protein synthesis, which for people listening, if you haven't gone through it before, I'm sure you have, is the turning the proteins that we eat, the amino acid breakdown, and using that mechanism to build and maintain lean muscle. That's completely interrupted and distorted through perimenopause, because estrogen is one of the key players in that. So if we know that that's like on the cards, if we know that building and maintaining lean muscle is impacted, then we need to be looking for that. We're going to be losing muscle. We're going to find it easier to gain fat. We're going to be a risk of osteoporosis purely because estrogen is part of the bone building process. Strength training can turn all of those things on its head. Strength training is the number one thing recommended by the Osteoporosis Foundation for building new bone. The stimulus that we get from strength training actually creates those osteoblasts that build bone. So that's great. So there's a benefit. It also helps with all-cause diseases. It helps with insulin resistance, like the obesity, cardiovascular health, brain health. It helps with depression, anxiety. There's so many studies. I actually, literally, when I wrote the book, couldn't keep up with the amount of studies I found for the benefits of strength training. Another brilliant one, which there was two, were all about hot flashes, like vasomotor symptoms. When women did strength training compared to doing high cardio, extended cardio, there was a reduction in hot flashes by 70%.
Wow.
Like, and that's one of the symptoms that women are absolutely crippled by. They'll get 30, 40 hot flashes a day, and it's a nightmare. And strength training could be one of the answers to resolve that. So why not try it? And then, you know, just in general, like the miscommunication about what strength training is. I think it's why it's important that people like us three talk about it, because, you know, it's so good for our health. It's one of the pillars of longevity. The reason people die young is through frailty and falling and breaking bones. And this is literally the thing you need to do to offset that. Like, you can't do anything else to build muscle apart from resistance training. Walking's not going to be enough. Yoga's not going to be enough. It is in the beginning, but the stimulus literally isn't there because you adapt so very quickly to that. So I really try and push the message about the importance of strength training, but I also believe that there's an entry point for everyone. We all were beginners at some point, and strength training can look different for us all. But the benefits are just, there's so many, and I don't know that there's any negatives.
Yeah. And I think, because I'm thinking of my mom, who, you know, we talk about the benefits of strength training, and there are people who just don't enjoy it, right? Like, they don't like going to the gym. Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is, like, activity is better than no activity. So, like, if you're someone who doesn't enjoy strength training, like, and you do like walking, you do like yoga, that's better than doing nothing at all. But I would also say too, like, there are different ways to lift and do resistance training than actually having to go to the gym. So, you know, like, even something like gardening, if you're like lifting a bunch of like soil and doing a bunch of things, like, there's things that you can do that's not necessarily like going to the gym, being a bro, like slamming protein shakes.
I'm very cognizant of that. And I think that encouraging activity and movement and things that spark joy in women is like something that's super important. And no, you do not have to go to the gym to work out. You can work out at home. I'm actually at home in like my little loft space with all my dumbbells behind me. It doesn't have to be complicated. And I remember speaking to Dr. Lisa Lewis, who her PhD, she's a psychologist, but she has her PhD in motivation. And she was like saying sometimes the impetus and the motivation isn't there for women to do it. They want to do it, but they don't enjoy it. And so she's like studied this and said, you know, we know that if women start doing something, what happens is we start to feel more confident. We start to feel better about ourselves. Our whole outlook on our health usually starts to change. And then curiosity builds, and that curiosity will be like, well, then I wonder what else I'm capable of. You know, I've just done a 60-minute yoga class, and it was all body weight strength, and it was hard 6 weeks ago, but now it feels easy. I wonder now what else I can do because I feel capable. So that's what I mean with my message. I think that we can all start somewhere, and I walk every day. Walking is so important, but I just think that there's things we can do to take charge of our health, and they don't need to be complicated, and we just need to just keep harping on about them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, something that I think a lot of, dare I say, older women, but I think women like probably 50 and above in this generation, tend to hear the word strength training or resistance training and think weights, dumbbells, barbells. I don't want to touch those, but like what we're talking about with this entry point, right, is resistance training can start with your body weight. Like that can be enough. It can start with a resistance band. That can be enough. Ultimately, that will limit you to a certain extent once you get strong enough. But for a lot of people, that is, a good couple months of training that you don't have to buy anything. You don't have to go to a gym. You don't have to get all the equipment, and you can still get all of the benefits that it ensues.
It's exactly that. And I honestly think that starting with body weight and things like resistance bands, you've got at least half a year's worth of workouts there consistently. And it's great. And then honestly, every single woman that I know that does that I've had this conversation, then goes out and buys a small set of dumbbells because they're like, well, I'll just add a little bit in. And I think that that's okay. You don't have to go and try and lift your body weight. But I just think that women don't think they can. And my message is, oh, yes, you can. You definitely can. I've just seen you throw your 45-pound grandkid up in the air, right? I know you can do it, right? It's just, and maybe that's a strength. Maybe, Christina, you get your mum to get the baby and do squats with the baby in her hand. There you go.
Yeah, there we go.
She'll like that for sure.
Oh yeah.
So actually, you brought up a great topic a couple minutes ago, Amanda, about misconceptions and myths around menopause. And you also, already just busted one that resistance training can flip a lot of those negative health effects on its head. But I want to know, other misconceptions around menopause and really bust those myths, clear that up today, off the top of my head. Things that I've heard, and clearly I know nothing, but here's what I hear, right? I hear I can't lose weight anymore. I have to use hormone replacement therapy if I want to be in shape. My metabolism has tanked, all of that sort of stuff. So let's debunk that.
What does the data say, right? Because I don't talk about this from just my opinion. Like, I really have spent the time looking at what the data says. We all probably know about the latest research that came out about metabolism. It was actually groundbreaking, and a lot of menopausal women fought back about it, but they looked at data from across the spectrum of all ages, and they have proven that our metabolism doesn't start to decline until after we're 60, in that age range. Even menopausal women on hormone therapy, not on hormone therapy. There's no big significant metabolic change that happens in menopause. We have to stop blaming menopause for weight gain, right? Or for our don't even get there with broken metabolism, but the real shift in metabolism happens in our 60s. From this really robust data. So, but if that's the case, why do 80% of menopausal women put at least 5 pounds on? That's what the studies have shown. So there's a multiple number of reasons. Estrogen and progesterone decline don't intrinsically mean you've put weight on. But what typically happens is women go through this really long period of time of not feeling great. And so their consistency and their routines all start to change. The way that they process their food might change a little bit differently. They might be more bloated, and that can definitely happen. But I know for myself personally, I had to have a very, very hard conversation, and that was, why am I 10 pounds heavier? It's because of menopause. And when I look back, it was well, probably because 4 of the days of the 7, you sat on the sofa and didn't do anything, and you didn't focus on your nutrition like you did. You were definitely more mindless in your eating patterns than mindful, because you literally couldn't, it wasn't there. And so honestly, by just then focusing in on being mindful and understanding my hunger cues and only eating when I was hungry and being satisfied and focusing on proteins, etc., then it rebounded, right? So like women can lose weight in menopause. There is no indication that hormone therapy helps with weight loss either. What hormone therapy it appears to do for the majority of women that take it, it helps them feel back to normal again, and they can then start implementing all the stuff they did before. It usually is the gateway to them feeling normal again. And so I have a whole chapter in my book called "Why Am I So Bloody Fat?" And it was really funny. My husband was reading my book, and my kid went out to talk to him, and I was like, "Where's your dad?" And he went, "Oh, he's just trying to work out why you're so bloody fat," because he was reading that chapter in my book. And I sort of go through all of the different things that are sort of like thrown at us, because it's like, you know, the response to our hunger hormones changes. Like we start being hungry all the time. Like there's so many physiological changes happen in menopause that it's really hard to cope with these changes. And so first of all, stop being a dick to yourself because you've put weight. you put weight on. Maybe you're meant to put some weight on. Estrogen actually gets produced in some of the fat cells in our body. So that mechanism tries to kick in place. And so it's finding the space between, maybe you've put a bit of weight on, but too much is too much, right? So finding that happy balance.
You were talking, sorry to interrupt, you were talking about HRT. So I actually had a client of mine who started getting estrogen. And so she actually had the reverse effect. So she didn't tend to, she was feeling better as far as her mood and energy, but she started to gain a little bit of weight from that. And because she was, I know she is so adherent to her nutrition. So she's like, I haven't changed anything as far as workouts, food. And so she went back to her doctor, and they said that she might have actually had too high of estrogen. So they bumped the dosage back down. So I think kind of like what you're saying is that HRT is not something that you absolutely need to have in order to get back or look like you're in shape again.
Yeah. And so actually was going to talk about HRT. So
perfect.
One of the myths out there, and it's a myth that needs to die, and it should have done already, is that HRT can cause breast cancer, because that categorically is not the case. There's a couple of things. First of all, the term HRT is misleading, and the correct term that's used in North America now is MHT. HRT, hormone replacement therapy, MHT, menopause hormone therapy, because it isn't actually replacing your hormones. It's actually giving you hormones, but it's not replacing them back to a level like your client, actually, probably, Christina. It's not replacing them back to the level they previously were. So the word replacement has been removed from the lexicon type thing. So menopause hormone therapy was vilified in 2002 because of a study that was misinterpreted and has since been pulled back, that said that estrogen with progesterone caused breast cancer in women, right? But when they looked at the women, they were all postmenopausal in their late 60s with underlying health conditions. And just being a woman and just being older are your two highest risk factors for breast cancer. So they've done multiple studies since, and so hormone therapy does not cause breast cancer. But here's the thing. You can't have a conversation about menopause without including menopause hormone therapy. You cannot, right? Because it's important. If a woman is struggling with her symptoms, she should be able to go to her doctor and have a valid conversation about it. And often that doesn't happen, and it's very frustrating. But menopause hormone therapy, as far as the medical consensus is concerned, is only indicated for certain things like vasomotor symptoms, your hot flashes, insomnia, maybe mood changes because of insomnia, and the genitourinary symptoms of menopause. Even though a woman can have up to 30 odd symptoms, it's not always indicated for that. It typically helps with that though, right? Just because, you know, that's just the medical terminology. But not every single woman needs to be on hormone therapy. Not every woman can go on hormone therapy, and not every woman does well on hormone therapy. And so my issue with the conversation around hormone therapy is that we've gone from women not getting it because they thought it was going to give them breast cancer to it now being a panacea. And it's neither of those things. It's somewhere in the middle. And actually, as always, And it's really funny because well, it's not funny, but it's really relevant that in the UK there's the British Menopause Society, the Endocrine Society, and the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists have just issued a joint statement stating all of this again, because they've got to the point where they were like, who is saying all of these things about hormone therapy? If you need it, you should have it if you can. But if you don't have it, there are other things you can do. And then we have to look at the whole picture. It's never in isolation. And that's always my take home. I want to cover every woman's unique experience, but it certainly isn't a cancer causing hormone. So if that's the thing that's stopping you, then it shouldn't. If you're a woman that has had estrogen receptive breast cancer, then you may be a contraindication. In fact, that's the current medical consensus. So you need to speak to your oncologist. But, every woman is different. And so I think it's just really important these things are available for all women to see. I have them on my website. If you're not sure, just drop me an email. I'll ask you, I'll advise you. But I don't ever give medical advice. I just point you to the medical consensus because I am a nutrition and fitness coach. I'm not a doctor. I know my lane and I stay in it. But I just think that when women are educated and empowered, they can make these choices for themselves. Yeah. And then the last myth, because we were talking about myths before I went off on one, is that it's not for old people. It's not just hot flashes. And sex doesn't get better. My husband told me to say that because he was like, when you go through menopause, do you get more horny? And I don't think so.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
I do want to kind of highlight some underlying themes of everything you said with all that myth busting, which was amazing, because it's really in line with just what we preach about here at Barbell Lifestyle Podcast with just behavior change. One, women and people in general, but a lot of times women need to have more compassion for themselves. And something you said earlier just really rang true on that, where like we're just being so freaking hard on ourselves, whether it's with weight gain or our hormones changing or trying to hit 7 days a week at the gym or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Another thing that was really interesting was, along the lines of, your hormones are changing, things are going crazy, you have all these symptoms and you're going through menopause. But it's not necessarily the weight gain or, the loss of muscle and all of that is not necessarily about those changes in particular. Like, can they make you more susceptible to those changes? Sure. But, it all comes back to your behavior. It all comes back to your response to the circumstance that you're placed in. And that's something that we like to teach about, no matter your age, no matter your situation, no matter what things you're going through, you have circumstances that you're placed under. And, that our job as coaches is to empower you to figure out how do you respond in a way that pushes you and makes you go one foot in front of the other and make progress, right? No matter what. And so I think that was really huge that you said, because it's empowering. It's also intimidating because it forces people to take personal responsibility.
Yeah.
But it's empowering to know I can do something about this.
What's really interesting is that like you lose sight of that when you're in chronic pain.
Yeah.
Right. You do. Right. And so I knew that doing behavioral, I think we've both all done behavioral change and coaching. And I think that the hardest thing for a lot of perimenopausal women is they feel isolated. They don't feel capable. They don't recognize themselves, and they potentially see that this is how they're always going to feel. So the first thing for any conversation about this is this type of education and knowledge. That's not true. None of those statements are true. You're not alone. You are capable. You don't have to suffer, and it isn't always going to be like this. So those things are true. But then it's funny, when I wrote my book, I did it in 2 parts, and I had like the part 1, like the what is menopause? Why do we get fat? Like all of those things, like, and then what medical interventions are available, both hormonal and non-hormonal, and supplements, which there isn't many. And then the second part of the book is I sort of called it a menopause toolkit, but it essentially is broken down into 4 segments: the eating, the exercise, the stress management, and the mindset.
Oh yeah.
And it's all of those things. and I'm not going to go into the details, but I literally encourage women at the end of every chapter to pick a habit, try it, stick with it, do it for a month, because oh my God, it takes it. Habits take ages, right? Like, and so we're not offering any quick fixes here. And we're sort of saying, you need to look for protein at least at your meal times, like at dinner time for 30 days. Can you do that? And they're like, oh my God, 30 days of like, oh God. And it doesn't feel like it's ever going to get easier, but it does. And it works. And we know it works. Like there's science there to back this up.
Yeah.
And that can be done in conjunction with or without hormone therapy. But I tell you what, if you're taking hormone therapy and then you're drinking every night and smoking fags and then not moving and they're stressed to the hilt, it's not going to help you. It has to all be together. And I think that that's sort of where I get a bit pissed off, like with the panacea message. It's like, no, well, that's not really how it works, is it? In any aspect of life, it's not how it works, is it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, that brings up a great point to where, this is why we all do what we do. And especially you, as a menopause coach, and that's how you brand yourself. And that's the message that you portray. What you said really stood out to me and kind of gave me this light bulb here was, it's hard to see through, what can you control when you're in chronic pain or you're under chronic stress, right? And so the role of a coach for a woman in menopause is to simplify that, to clarify it, right? To make that journey easier so that even if you have the brain fog, even if you're going through all these symptoms, even if everything is crazy and it feels like the world is ending, you have someone in your corner to say, you can do this. Here's the simple thing you need to do today or this week.
Yeah.
And then let's reevaluate next week. Let's keep building on that instead of trying to fend for yourself with this. And I think that's really important in this time of life for a woman to have that kind of support.
And with that, making sure that the choices you make set yourself up for a win, because we sort of need them more than ever. Like it's like, I actually went through a phase of giving, I don't know if I'm embarrassed to say this, I went and bought myself some gold stars because I said to the kids, if I have 3 things on my list, my to-do list went from 20 to 3. I was like, I'm just going to do the big rocks. And I gave myself a gold sticker and I'd be like, gold sticker time. And my kids are like, oh God, she's lost her mind. She's lost her mind. But I sort of needed something. And then the final part of that is like when I talk about mindset in the book, I spent some time with a psychologist who changed my world completely, because when I was in the thick of menopause, not thinking I was ever going to evolve for it, and I actually got to a very low place, like it was quite worrying, but how can I ever evolve from this bottomless pit? I did something with her where it's called resiliency mindset, where I essentially started looking at the things that made me, like what were my character strengths, what were my values, like the things that actually got me out of bed in the morning, my family, my friends, my career, and my strengths of being like an empathetic, caring person that's curious and wants to help people. And so I did I'll tell you in the book how to do it and the psychological tools, but oh my goodness, all of a sudden I looked forward and I had like complete clarity and vision, and it was a game changer for me. So when I started coming out of that fog, and I'm now in a completely normal as I can be, it's a different normal. I feel like I'm not symptomatic anymore, like most women feel like this. I'm in a new level playing field. Those tools are literally what's driving me, and it gets me up every day. And all of those little habits that didn't feel like they were working at the time because I didn't see the change are just there now. I'm eating my protein, I'm walking every day, my vegetables are there, I'm taking the time to be mindful. So I think the point of that little tirade was like keep your eye on the prize, keep looking forward, because this is you now. This is what you're going to do for the rest of your life. It's not just to get you through the next couple of months. We want this to be a seismic change that stays, right? That sticks.
Yeah, I think something I was talking about with some clients on an office hour call that we had literally today, we were talking about, what does it take to make permanent change? Just background for you, my company's name is called Permanent Change Coaching. So we're all about making it last. And in order to change, you have to change. your reality, your normal, your day-to-day has to change, right? And so, for you to have a healthier lifestyle, it's not just, okay, I'm going to do these things. It's no, these things become what you do, who you are, and how you identify yourself and your lifestyle. That's hard. It's a hard change to make.
It's part of your identity. You're completely correct.
Yeah. And especially with that big shift, big shift of like, you're changing postmenopausal, that's another identity shift.
That's all I was going to say.
Yeah, you're compounding it, right?
Yeah, you're compounding it completely. Yeah, you've nailed it. And so it's sort of when these habits become more important. And I hear perimenopausal women saying, but I can't do it and I don't feel like it. And that's why I'm like, set yourself up for these wins, because it compounds. They're not in isolation. All of these things compound. And like you say, hopefully will be permanent changes for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have loved this conversation so far. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. But we always ask all of our guests this final question to kind of wrap up. And we're curious to know if you had to give our audience one tip to live a healthier, sustainable lifestyle, what would it be?
Just one?
Just one.
Just one. Oh my gosh, like that changes. It's one of those questions. It's so good because it changes from day to day, right? The things that we do. I actually think the tip that I would give women is that it's okay to put yourself first. So going from the we to me mentality is something I'm a big pusher of. So instead of like thinking, I need my husband and my kids and my friends all to be happy, 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 how about you stop and you take a cup of coffee, go outside in the garden, have 5 minutes to yourself and just sit there and go, what's it going to take for me to have a good day, to be successful? Actually put yourself first, because when you do, everybody else around you benefits. All of the things that you were worried about just happen organically. And so I do that now, and not one person in my family has ever said, Mom's so selfish because she takes time for herself. They actually see that it's been part of my growth. And so I think that putting yourself first is not a selfish act. It's an act of like self-resiliency, preservation almost, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. I think it's a really powerful message to other parents as well, right? Like it's actually healthy. And
right,
you're setting
right now, Christina.
Yeah.
You're exactly in that, right? And it's really hard to put yourself first when you've got a newborn. But you have to be hydrated before you breastfeed. Otherwise, the baby's going to suffer. You're going to suffer. Like, it's simple things, right? But we just don't do that because women are nurturing creatures, right?
Yep.
So
yeah. Well, this was great. I feel like this is how we are with every single episode, but we feel like we could probably chat with you for another couple hours. But we really appreciate you being on and taking time to talk with us. And I'm sure we'll probably have you back on.
And if there's any questions after the podcast, then reach out to me. And if there's anything that I didn't sort of clarify, I'll come back on for sure. No worries. Good luck with the podcast. Thank you.
Yeah. Where can people find you on social media?
Oh, right. Yeah. So if you just go to amandathebe.com, which is my website, you can get access to my book, my own podcast, which is more specified for midlife women, and all my social media is there. So you can just find me there.
Awesome. It's a great website, guys. Go check it out.
Thank you.
So we hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You can find both of us on Instagram. You can find me at Christina Fit, and Marissa is at Marissa Roy Fitness. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we hope to see you back next week.